Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah and in this episode, we sit down with Jim Cunningham and John Gaspard. Now, maybe you haven't heard of those names, and that's because they're not performing magicians, they're not gigging magicians, they're not magicians creating magic, but they've done some cool things in the world of magic, and I wanted to share, them two, along with Suzanne, who I'm sure you have heard of, produce Sunday Night Magic, which is an incredible show that happened in Minneapolis. It was regularly occurring. I performed on it. They brought in phenomenal magicians, and that was incredible. But they've done a bunch more too. They have a podcast now called the Eli Marks Podcast, which is based on the Eli Marks book series, which is books and audiobooks. And it's a fictional series about a magician, and it's a mystery, and it's incredible. It's a ton of fun, and it's ridiculously accurate. So I thought I would bring these two on and discuss about what they've done, what they're doing. And I got to tell you, their energy and excitement and passion is phenomenal. So I think you guys are going to love it. We talk about podcasts, we talk about audiobooks, we talk about things being adjacent to magic. We talk about what you can do in the world of magic that isn't necessarily being a performing, gigging magician. It was a ton of fun, a wonderful episode. I loved it. I love their energy, and I think you will too. Here it is, a wonderful episode with Jim Cunningham and John Gaspard. How are you, Jim and John? How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. It is so much fun to hear you say that introduction because I've listened to, I believe since, if not the beginning, very close to the beginning of the podcast. And so I hear that, every week, and to hear it live was kind of fun.
I'm pretty good too. I'm in St. Paul, which is God's country. So you can't be bad if you're in St. Paul.
And I'm in Minneapolis, which is right next to God's country,
But you don't go to Minneapolis unless there's work. You don't cross the river unless there's work.
To put a little bit of a story together, I met John when I performed in Minneapolis with Ben at Sunday Night Magic. Let's talk about what that show is. So I came down to Minneapolis. I did this show. You had an incredible audience. You had an incredible magic community there. You were in a gorgeous theater. I mean, at the time, I think I was actually just, with Ben, and I think somebody pulled out of the show and they're like, can Jonah do it? And I ended up I had all my stuff with me because I just figured, I might end up doing something, on the road. And I did it. It was so much fun. Like, the energy was electric. The community was great. And, it was a lot like what was going on here in Toronto. And we were just like, we love what's happening here. And then we spoke with Suzanne about how things were working behind the scenes. And I not to necessarily get into all of the mechanics of it, but the thing doesn't seem like it's designed to make a bunch of profits or do anything like that. The thing seems like it's designed to put on awesome shows and have this awesome environment and just have this amazing thing that it is. So it was just a phenomenal experience, and I was very, very happy to connect with you about being on the podcast and hearing about all the other amazing things that you guys have done, which we'll get to. But let's kind of go to Sunday Night Magic, and then we'll zoom all the way back. Talk to me a little bit about Sunday Night Magic. Like, I shared a little bit of what it's like from my end. Maybe share what it's like from your guys' end.
Sure. Well, it started because when I started writing these books about magicians, not being a magician, I had to learn about them. And I met Suzanne, who, we're very lucky in Minneapolis to have a world-class magician, just a few miles from me. And I took lessons with her to learn how to do an ambitious card and also to learn kind of what the day-to-day life of a magician is like. And we became friends. And she was doing a show at a restaurant. It was kind of a special show where she sold tickets. Normally she did walk around. She sold tickets, and it was a nice little crowd of about, 25, 30 people. And at the end of the show, she said, I would like to just keep doing this. I have so many friends I've met at the Magic Castle. Why don't we bring in a magician once a month or whatever and have him put on a lecture and then do a show for magicians? And I said, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well do it for the public. And if we're going to do that, we should have Jim involved, because Jim not only knows the magic community, but he also makes his living as an MC. So we might as well bring him in. And that was the beginning of it. Suzanne just opens her Rolodex. And every month we bring in a different one of her friends. We've had Max Maven. We were the last place that Eugene Berger performed publicly. Each magician would come in on a Saturday, have a nice dinner with them the night before, do a lecture Sunday afternoon at Eagle Magic, the local magic store, and then do a show for the public that night on Sunday night. We were given a theater to use called Theater in the Round. We only used half the theater because magicians don't like performing in the round. We get about 75 to 125 people for each show. And like you said, it's not a money-making scheme. We figured out how to make it a not money losing scheme.
That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing.
Yep. And it has been tremendous fun because, this is Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a nice cosmopolitan city, but there are not a lot of people who make their living doing magic here. And so to be able to bring in these, to bring John Carney in and hang out with him for a weekend.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Yeah, it is. And everybody was of that level. So, Pop Hayden comes in. It's just phenomenal. For Minneapolis audiences, both magician and lay audiences, it was a huge deal because there's no other way you could see those kind of performers without going out to the Magic Castle or something.
One of the things that's so interesting about this show and about this community is that this kind of thing, obviously, I know you're referencing the Magic Castle, but this kind of thing is really popping up in so many different locations. This style of, bring in a performer, put together a show. Maybe there's a lecture because it's somebody amazing who's coming into town. And there's a couple of really cool things that's going on. And one thing that we noticed in our community is that so many of the people that are involved, and this is maybe a weird sentence, but this is a topic we're, I think, going to dive into a lot in this conversation, is so many of the people involved, the people that want to volunteer, the people that want to help, the people that want to be part of the community are, what I like to call magic adjacent. It's incredible that we have so many magic adjacent people, and it ends up being in the community of the producers, the people organizing it, are people that have kind of always wanted to have some sort of, magic in their life. Maybe they have a little bit of it, maybe they, but it's not necessarily full-time performers. And it's interesting that, I'm talking to two people who are heavily involved in the production of a magic show. John, you're listing off names, like magicians would. And I know other people that are able to do that also don't perform, don't do tricks, anything else like that, but are really excited about the magic community, magicians. And I don't know, maybe this may sound crazy. Maybe that's something like new. I don't know. I would love to know what you guys think about that, but I just feel like I didn't know if there was like magic fans in the way that you could know of 30 magicians and not also be a magician. Like, was that something that even ever happened before?
The project was all about what you just said. I am not a full-time working magician. I learned Eugene Berger's show Hauntings with his approval and his training so that I could do it here in Minneapolis. I grew up around magic. My brother's a magician, and I worked backstage for him, putting rabbits in boxes and doves in trays. And so I have a kind of a working knowledge of magic, but I don't perform it because it's just too nerve-wracking most times. But I love it. So to be a part of Sunday Night Magic for me was all about, well, this is fantastic because I'm going to get to see world-class performers right without even leaving my metropolitan area. David Regal, John Carney, Max Maven. I mean, these people are people that I would kill to see anywhere, anytime. And, Minneapolis is not a stop for most of them. So it allowed us to essentially get to see things that I really was jazzed about seeing and still am. I can't wait until the pandemic is over and we get back to it and start bringing magicians back here because it's been a tremendous amount of fun.
I am so excited, and you guys have something really, really fun going on there. Let's kind of zoom all the way back because we've got two things going on. We've got two stories that are not going to necessarily start with my uncle showed me a magic trick and now I'm a magician, which is how most of the episodes start. And the other thing is that we've got two stories happening both at once simultaneously. So I'd love to kind of zoom back and figure out how magic ended up in your life and how it ended up being that both of you can list off names of magicians And I mean, Jim, I know you're a magician. It sounds like you're modestly not a magician, but that you actually are. From what I understand, you can perform, from what I understand, and that you do perform magic sometimes in some ways, but you're not a full-time performing magician.
I know just a few things, and I figure out a few things new every year to do.
That sounds like you're a magician. Do you have a box in a cupboard or on a shelf with some tricks that you do?
Do I have a box? Boy, do I. Yeah, I've got plenty of. I got a great library. I got all kinds of magic tricks. I just don't do them.
Let me ask you this. When you go to Penguin Magic and you buy something, does everything autofill?
Yes. In fact.
Okay, you're a magician.
Okay, well then, yeah, you're a magician. To buy a haunted key,
you're a magician, and Jim. I forgot I had filled my cart with stuff maybe a year before that, and I wanted to spend whatever it was, $19.95 on a haunted key. I spent $1,000. Accidentally. As Bach shows up, what is all of this? I didn't. Oh my gosh! So it happens.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's zoom all the way back, and I guess I'll start with John, and then I'll switch over to Jim. Let's zoom all the way back. And John, how did you get into magic? How did magic get into your life?
Well, I don't want to keep making this the John and Jim show, but it was because of Jim. We met about 35 years ago. I was producing meetings and events and videos. Jim was a local talent who was at that point kind of renowned locally for having starred in Tony and Tina's Wedding here locally for a long time. And he came in for an audition for an event. I don't remember what the event was, but I do remember that the co-producer returned to me when Jim was done auditioning and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think we should hire him. I think we should keep hiring him until we can't afford to hire him anymore," which was sort of what happened. He became our go-to guy just due to his versatility and his willingness to say yes to whatever we needed to do at a meeting, an event, or a video. So because I spent a lot of time with him, I noticed at one point that he kept doing this thing where he had a small, little tiny leather ball, and he would move it from one hand to the other, and he'd open the hand that he dropped it in, and it wouldn't be there. And he did that constantly. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm learning some magic, and I was told I need to do this for about a year before I can get up to speed on things." So that was interesting. And then there was a magic convention in town, and he invited me to come see the gala show. And so that was interesting. I think John Carney was there. I think he did Mr. Misto. I'm not sure, though. A lot of interesting people there. And then I realized that I had more than a few friends who were magicians, primarily because I was in the meetings and events business and I kept hiring them. So there's another magician in town here named Bill Arnold who created the show Triple Espresso. I work with Bill a lot. There's a magician out of Wisconsin named Arden James. I work with Arden James a lot. So I just sort of knew a lot of magicians, more than most people would know. And when it came time to I wanted to write a series of mysteries, it just made sense that the main character would be a magician.
I love that. What an amazing introduction, and phenomenally exciting. And with that, I think you've made me feel a little bit regretful that I called out that Jim wasn't a magician here. It sounds like the guy is like more magician than he's walking around fiddling with a ball in his hand too, while you're, running events. And I think it's really exciting, by the way, that, with a background of putting on events, you had an eye on the world of magic, because one thing that happens with the world of magic and corporate events is there tends to be a really good filter. There's just a really good filter between good quality magicians who end up getting there because things need to look good. They need to be good. They need to feel good. So you just by running and operating corporate events, you get to see a lot of phenomenal entertainers, and you get to understand what good entertainment is, what production value is, what somebody can bring in a briefcase and not, and in a van and not, you really start to understand those things because you see it over and over and over again. You know what it's like to set up and tear down, all of those different things, which are important in magic, and especially important to understand value and different pieces like that. So an incredible background on the way into, show producing, but also writing, these incredible books, which we'll get to in a moment. I want to pass it on to Jim. And Jim, walk us through how you got into magic.
Well, like I maybe mentioned, my brother is a magician. So he's 13 years older than I am. So by the time I was able to have memories, my brother was doing magic shows, both for the public and testing things on me. And I think the trick that sort of ignited the passion for me is a trick called Glorpy, which I don't know, it's kind of a maybe forgotten trick by a lot of people, but I still have many versions of it. And it is a trick invented by a magician who hooked my brother on magic, a guy named Bernie Trueblood, who used to perform at a resort that we vacationed at every year as a family. And that trick, Glorpy, was all about ghosts. And I've been fascinated forever, since I can remember, with ghosts and witchcraft and hauntings and spooky stuff. And so that was sort of the jumping off point for me. And I, as I said, I'm fascinated by magic. I love magic. I don't like to perform magic because I love it so much. I don't want to do anything that would damage it in some way. I want it to be good. And when I see the caliber of magician that I think is really good, I realize how far below that I am. So I tend not to perform magic. I can just enjoy it or collect it. And that's one of the things that I sort of picked up from Eugene Berger. I read his book, Spirit Theater, right after it came out. And I reached out to him the following spring and said, "Say, I read your book and I'd really like to do your show. Have you sold the rights to anybody? How do I?" And I was a younger guy. I probably would never do something like that today. But I called him out of the blue and he said, "Well, let me think about it." And we ended up working together and becoming friends. And that's the only kind of magic I do. I don't do anything that doesn't look like a ghost is making something happen.
Right. You don't want it to be you who made it happen, or you don't want to claim to be a magician or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I have a tremendous love for magic and magicians, but I don't like to perform it very much because I think it's so hard to do well. And when you see someone who can do it well, it's a mind-bending experience. You almost have that sort of childlike reaction when somebody does something very well magically. You get a childlike reaction again, like, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" And I can't even approach that in general. So I don't do magic, but I love it. I love it.
I think that's a topic that we're going to talk about a little bit in this, because one thing, and you said, John, that you listened to this podcast, you have for a little while. One of the underlying things in this that I often love discussing is, especially in the last 10 years, but this is true for a long time, but especially in the last 10 years, that the world of magic has so many different opportunities in it that are not being a performing, gigging magician. And what's been so cool about this podcast is connecting with magicians who have gone down unique roads with respect to magic. I'm talking everything from stage production to creating playing cards to acting in magic related things to YouTube channels to Rubik's cubing to, and there's unlimited different versions to writing, for helping magicians write their shows, to helping be the magic consultant on non-magic projects, to helping magicians release videos of the tricks that they're selling, to helping magicians make promo videos, to helping them make websites, and so on and so on and so on. And like, this concept, especially now, of magic or magic with, and being able to go and engage in the magic communities has just been incredible. And I've tried to encourage everybody to rub up against, brush up against magic in as many ways as you can, and see, I have a podcast, I produce events, and I perform. And you know what? I have no idea, listening to you talk, Jim, about performing, there's some ideas that, like, there's like flags that I want to challenge a little bit, that I'm like, dude, you should go out there and perform. And then there's other ideas where I'm like, Yeah, like I see people who, like, I've interviewed, the best of the best who tell me that they're in the workshop every day, coming up with a new idea, rewatching a video of their act. And I'm like, so, and I get that. And who knows where my career will take me, 5, 10, 20, 30, who knows if I'll be performing. So, who knows? But I love this idea of magic and magic with doing things that are associated with the magic world. And I think this is a beautiful transition to talk about this book project, this series of books and audiobooks that are absolutely incredible, because it's another one of these examples of something where, anybody could enjoy it, but the way that it's magic and allows us to really allow people in the magic community to get an incredible kick out of it, because it's written from people who get magic, know magic, refer to magic, understand magic. So we've been kind of talking around it a little bit. I kind of want to just pass it over to you two to explain how this project came to be, because there's now a couple of books. Each one of them is named after a magic trick, and they're incredible stories. And I listened to the audiobooks of 2 of them, and they're just phenomenal, well produced, incredible stories, and really, really well done. So kind of walk us through, how did these books come to be?
I had for many years written and produced and directed and edited ultra low budget movies, which is a fun thing to do, but is a young man's game.
What's an ultra low budget movie? I know what a low budget movie is. What's an ultra low budget movie?
Clerks is an ultra low budget movie.
Okay.
Where you have enough money basically to shoot it and process it, but where no one's really getting paid and you're not really expecting to make any money. And I've hit that every single time. No one got paid and we haven't made any money, but it's a very fun experience. But I wanted to continue doing something creative that didn't require me getting up at 5 a.m. and hauling heavy gear up 6 or 7 flights of stairs to shoot in a very hot apartment anyway. And I thought, well, I'd like to write a mystery. I'd like to write what's called a cozy mystery. It's called cozy because it's usually the main character is not an actual police person or an actual detective, but is a real person who sort of stumbled into it. If the best description I can think of for the Eli Marks series is, think of Murder, She Wrote, but Angela Lansbury is played by Derek Hughes. And you get a good idea there. It's a charming young guy who's a magician who stumbles into murders. And so I wrote the first one. I named it after a trick called the ambitious card. And like I mentioned earlier, I learned how to do that trick from Suzanne. And the whole process of writing and releasing a book is a whole nother podcast, because it's a big industry. It can be a difficult industry. A lot of people spend considerable time trying to get an agent or getting a publisher. And I did all of that and did finally find a small publisher who liked the book and published it and did a nice job. And then I decided I'll do another one, and I'll name it after another trick. So that became The Bullet Catch. And they sort of just dominoed their way down through The Miser's Dream, The Linking Rings, primarily because the character was fun. People seemed to be responding to him. And magic has such great names for tricks. So there's always a good trick name out there that makes it an intriguing book title. The books are designed for mystery readers who like that sort of light mystery without a lot of violence in it. In that grouping, there's going to be a subset who are magicians. My publisher thought all magicians would like the books, but only magicians who like mysteries are likely to like the books, really, because they're mysteries. I did work very, very hard to get the magic right, because I knew that it could be very, very frustrating for someone in a field to read about their field and have things be wrong. So a lot of time has gone into listening to, for example, podcasts where magicians talk to each other. I know early on I listened to Dodd Vickers' The Magic Newswire, which was very helpful because not only did they have interviews with magicians, but they also did an occasional kind of roundtable with magicians just chatting. You really get a sense of what is a magician's concern? What do they care about? And I'm able to put that on to Eli. So there's 7 books in the series so far, working on an 8th. You can read them in any order you want, although there is sort of a progression with Eli and his girlfriend. And they all involve Eli being adjacent to some sort of crime and somehow using his knowledge of magic, that kind of mindset the magicians have, to either solve the mystery or solve it and be wrong and almost die because of it. It's out 50-50 either way.
You know, what was so exciting about reading it, and first of all, thank you for that explanation of how it came to be, because it's a really, really phenomenal project. And what I found so exciting about it, and this you kind of touched on, was the accuracy of the magic in a book like that. And you mentioned that how frustrating it can be for an artist or for somebody to see their field done wrong. And, you know, it's amazing when I mention that I'm a magician, people talk about Arrested Development, you know. And I've recently been rewatching that show, and like, I would give it a 3 out of 10 in terms of its portrayal of anything related to how magic actually is. You know, like maybe a 3 out of 10. And in terms of magic movies, you know, like none of them, I mean, some of them maybe earn a 6. You know, maybe if they're trying, but most of them aren't even pushing 4 or 5 out of 10 in terms of accuracy, in terms of, you know, how I feel. Think about magic on TV. You know, it's always somebody pulling silks out of their sleeve accidentally, or something, you know, to that end, or a rabbit getting loose, you know, or something that really does miss the mark of some of the things of a magician. You know, one of them that was in the book that I'll just comment on that was kind of funny is you talked about the moment Eli had a moment on stage where he like forgot the name of a spectator because of all of what he was doing on stage. And he was just so busy. Like, that is such a relatable thing. That's not something that a non-magician can even fathom thinking about. It doesn't even come up, you know, that you would bring somebody up on stage, say, this is Vanessa. And then immediately be like, I have no idea what that person's name is. I have to now talk about them. And now, like, you know, I don't know what that is. That's something that magicians have to figure out how to problem solve against and, like, you know, learn some tactics for. So I really, really appreciated that. Help me understand, you know, when I brought up this book before we started recording, John was like, it's all Jim. And then when we started recording, Jim was like, it's all John. Jim, help me understand how you had a role in putting these projects together.
I didn't really. I had no role in putting any of this together. It really is all John. John conceived this. He wrote these. He executed these. All I'm doing is reading the books into a microphone.
If I may interject, yes, that's true. However, most of it is true. However, there wouldn't be any audiobooks if on a long drive to Iowa for a corporate event, you hadn't turned to me and said, you know, we can produce audiobooks ourselves now. Maybe we should do the Eli books. And at that point, we were maybe 3 books in at that point, and there's 7 now. And he was right. We can do that. We did do that, and we continue to do that. And because of that, the books are a little different now because I am writing with Jim's voice in my head. When it comes to how does Eli sound like, what does Uncle Harry sound like, what is the rhythm of the jokes when there are jokes, it's all very much now sifted through his voice. And I often tell people when they say I'm interested in the series, I'll say, start with the audiobooks, because I think it's a better experience hearing him read it than having your own brain read it.
Well, John spends an inordinate amount of time, I think, making sure he gets the magic right, or the concerns of a magician correct. No, in any of the books is a method given away, a trick revealed, none of that. So as a magician reads it, they're going to have a level of appreciation, but in no way, shape, or form is a magician going to say, how dare you? Why would you? I'm making a living off that. Why would you? It's not like that at all. It's just so much fun. I kept seeing the term cozy, John, and I didn't know that was a thing. It's a thing.
Cozy it's definitely a subset of mysteries and thrillers.
I did not know that. Yeah. So this is all.
And I will say one trick is revealed in it, which is the thing where you put the ball under your armpit and it stops your pulse, because it's such a dangerous trick. I thought, well, I'm just going to reveal that so people will stop doing it.
Or everyone will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an exciting project. And, you know, when we logged on, Jim, I was recognizing your voice from the audiobook, which is which is just super, super fun. I want to know, in putting this out in the world, and I found this with the podcast, what's really cool is when you put you out in the world, like the stuff you like, the stuff you are, the stuff you write, what ends up coming back is all these other people that are like you, that like the stuff you do, that engage with it, and it's been a while. You've put out some amazing things in the world. Talk to me about how the reception has been on this project, what some of the highlights have been, and how putting out a project that touches so closely on magic out into the world has affected things.
Well, the ultimate happened when I got an email from Teller himself, who had given me permission to use that very quote that I mangled earlier at the beginning of the fourth book in the series, The Linking Rings. And any time I use something like that, I always send the person a copy of the book. And in that instance, he emailed me and said I was, in the mood for a mystery. I read The Linking Rings. I really enjoyed it. I thought the killer was X. It turned out to be Y. So I now know that I fooled Teller, which is cool. But he went on to say, so often in these types of books, magic is not portrayed properly. And I really like the way that you got all the details right. And since that's what 99% of the effort in writing the books was to make sure that a working magician in reading it would not slam it onto a table or throw it across the room because I had just gotten something so wrong. To have him say that was probably, at that point, I should have stopped, because it's not going to get any better than that.
I'm glad you didn't, for one.
Yes, but it is fun to hear from magicians who have enjoyed it. That's interesting. It's also always interesting to hear just from, we got an email the other day from a guy in Switzerland who was listening to our podcast, which is all about the book. And that's just, hey, the guy in Switzerland is listening to what we're doing. I'm sure, Jonah, you've run into that as well. It's like, this really travels. It really, really travels. And that's really fun. It's something you've done. I think it was Stephen King who said the only real time travel that exists in the world is writing a book, because I write down something and 10 years from now you read it and we're connected. And that's time travel.
Yeah, it's phenomenal to see how these ripple effects kind of go out into the world and how some of this stuff comes back. Jim, for you, from reading every word, I don't know if I guess the last year and a bit, there's not a lot of travel and meeting people, but we were talking when we started, they're like, when I go to magic conventions, people recognize my voice and different things like that. Talk to me about what some of the fun ripple effects have been for you. What has kind of come back your way, or what have been some of the highlights of this project coming out?
Well, I can't say enough how much I enjoy recording these books for people, and how much I enjoy my time with John. I love him dearly, so it's a delight to go to his studio, and he usually splits a sandwich with me. And we have a little lunch, we have some jokes and laughs, we talk about things in our own community or our own lives, and then we go into the studio and record 4 or 5 chapters of the book. It's been just a delight, and I'm hearing from people who know me from other stuff that, hey, I'm listening to your podcast, and I didn't know anything about this book, and now I'm listening to the book, and gosh dang it, this whole thing is so much fun. So that's been a delight for me too. It's people from different pods and pools that I swim in, the sports world or some of the other things that I do, are finding this podcast and these books, and they're enjoying them, and they have absolutely no sort of connection to magic other than they found the podcast or the books, and now they enjoy them, which is terrific for me. If you're a magician and you read them, there's a whole level of appreciation that will happen for you because John has spent so much time getting it right. If you're not a magician, I think you're going to find these books delightful and intriguing and fun, and it's going to open you to a whole, like, oh man, this is kind of, I'm backstage here with a magician and how this all kind of works. And so I just am having so much fun with it. I hope he keeps writing and writing and writing, and that at some point he always jokes about killing off this character or that character. I say, please don't kill anybody.
Anybody who has followed this podcast for a while probably knows is the reason why my podcast exists, the reason why the Toronto Magic Company exists, the reason why Unconventional.fund exists, the reason why just every different weird thing that I've done exists is because of putting on cool projects, making cool projects. The fun of, as silly as it is, in asking Jim what his highlight was, it was meeting up with his friend for a sandwich and to talk about, half a sandwich and talk about life, which is both a joke, but also very serious that, in this conversation of all of these magic adjacent things and all these ways to be an active member and part of the magic community, a lot of ways to contribute that aren't necessarily being a full-time performing gigging magician. And this is really just a wonderful example of that, of how easy it is to put on projects. I'm going to talk about Ben for a second. Ben Train, who I do a bunch of Toronto Magic Company with, Unconventional.fund. He did a magic movie, a full-length feature film called The Series of Unfortunate Effects. And it's a movie about magic, and they shot a whole full production. And, there's so many different projects I can think of that involved me and a friend, just wanting to have a good time and put something ridiculous in the world. Who cares about, how much money it makes? And it sounds like you guys have decided to just put your brains together and put on fun projects a lot of time. So before we get into the podcast stuff, I kind of want to hear about this attitude, because it's kind of like a playful attitude for both of you to have, later in your careers, to still just want to be like, let's try this, let's have fun doing this. I think a lot of people lose that as time goes on. So talk to me about this project, this just trying and taking on new things that you guys are up to all the time.
Well, I learned it from Jim because Jim always, it's true. You always say yes to things. I know when we were doing corporate events, would you do this? Yes. Would you do this? Yes. And you also you have improv training. You followed the yes and concept. You would say yes and you would add to it. And it was your willingness to say yes to projects that didn't look like they were going to go anywhere. And a lot of them didn't, but some of the stuff we did and you have gone somewhere. And you used to say, when I said, why are you doing that? You'd say, bread on the water. And I just always remembered that it just doesn't hurt to go out and try it. If your only goal is to make money with it, there's probably easier ways to make money. But if your goal is to try to get something out there that people might enjoy and you're not worrying about the money, it's so much easier. I learned that making low budget movies, because I know people who have spent literally years trying to raise money to make a movie. And I just did not have the patience for that. Once I had a script, I wanted to go and shoot it. And was my modus operandi was, okay, we're ready to shoot. Let's go shoot it. We may not make anything on this, but it's not going to cost us a lot to do it. We're going to have fun doing it. And as long as you're enjoying the project, worry about the money later.
I love that. Jim, what do you feel about like taking on projects and starting things? Sunday Night Magic, you guys started and put together with who knows what, when you guys started, who knows what would happen, who would end up being a part of it, who would know, putting these books out into the world. Like, talk to me about this ability to just have fun and try new projects.
I've been blessed. I'm very fortunate I'm not particularly talented. I'm not particularly well read. I'm not particularly smart. But I've been able to work a lot because I say yes to things that many other people I think might say, well, what's it pay? It doesn't really pay much. Well, then I can't do that. I can't squeeze that into so I've been blessed and one thing leads to another, which leads to another. And the idea that money comes first, I think, is a no a lot of times. And I'm not saying that certainly I had a conversation yesterday with a client who said, we want to pay you this to host this event. And I said, well, I think here's what you really have to pay me. This is my rate, and I can be a little flexible, but here's why I charge what I charge, and you're paying me to get this right live once. So those kinds of projects allow me the freedom to say yes to other projects. If I had to make my living doing these kinds of projects, then there would have to be some sort of, I don't. I have this luxury that I've got enough work, and so it allows me to then have fun anywhere I want, at any time I want, with anybody I want. And then, so I say yes to just about everything that comes my way.
If you can get the work, the band of work, regular work that can pay you enough to allow you the other time to be creative and be playful, then those projects need to just have a greater than zero upside, and then they're worth doing. You know, like it's like, if anything good comes out of me doing this, it was worth it, right? If anything good comes out of me doing this, it was worth it because it was fun to do and it got, this amazing thing out into the world. So that's an incredible view. And I think for artists, especially people who, struggle with this question of like, sometimes it's hard. Like, is it work? Is it play? Is it fun when you're doing so much work that it doesn't feel like play anymore? And it's to remind yourself of that, which is we're kind of trying to sort out the business so that we can have so much fun tackling projects and potentially uncover something that's quite truly never been done before, or make something that's never been seen before and something new and something unique out in the world. So really, really phenomenal. I love that thought about projects. Let's talk a little bit about this podcast, because you guys are interviewing incredible people and you're doing something interesting with the podcast where you're taking little clips from the book and sharing that and allowing that to come out. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast project? You guys now have people like Steve Cohen, you have Julie Ang, you have like amazing magicians, Suzanne, obviously. Talk to me a little bit about this project and how it's been going.
The way it started was in the book business. When you're an independent book producer, you're writing and producing your own books. Marketing is a huge issue because you don't have marketing funds, and it costs money to get people to learn about your project. And one of the things I've been exploring more and more in the last couple of years is this concept of free. There is a mindset within booksellers of the independence ilk that some people refuse to give anything away for free. Others say you can't possibly build up a readership without having something for free. So I was exploring that. I'd done a couple short stories that I gave away for free. And at the end of the short story, I would say, hey, if you like this, grab the first book in the series, Ambitious Card. And that worked up to a point. And then I found in listening to podcasts, because all I did was listen to either magic podcasts or book podcasts, that giving away the first book in the series often led people to want to buy the rest of the series. It was a loss leader, I guess. So rather than just do that, which I do on occasion, I have 6, almost 7 now, books on tape that Jim has recorded. Why don't we give away the first one for free, the Ambitious Card for free? Listen to all 23 chapters for free. And I'll do that in a podcast format because I like podcasts and I know that people like binging podcasts, so that it might take 24 episodes for you to listen to all of the Ambitious Card. But at the end of this first season, it'll be up there. And 10 years from now, somebody can download that. And in a week, they can listen to the Ambitious Card from beginning to end for free. Every episode has a chapter. It's easy to find that chapter. It's all slated and marked and easy to find it. But I thought, well, let's give them a little something more than that. Jim refers to it as the DVD extras that you get on a movie. Because there is so much inside magic stuff in it, I thought, why don't we try to do a short interview with a magician or someone magic adjacent, as you say, at the beginning of each podcast, just to sort of set the tone for it. Here, for example, early on in the Ambitious Card, there's a throwaway mention of Max Malini. Now, in context, a magician reading that would totally get what Eli's talking about and might even want to explore it on their own. The average listener doesn't know who Max Malini is, but Steve Cohen does, because he was writing a book about Max Malini at the time and knew a lot about him even before the book, because he had based his career on the Malini mindset. So we get in touch with Steve Cohen, and he comes on and he talks to us for 20 minutes about Max Malini. So the podcast listener knows who Max Malini is. They listen to that chapter and they have a good time.
Brilliant strategy, a ton of fun. I love it. I really love it.
So that's sort of been the idea, is Usually there's a connection to that specific chapter in that episode. Occasionally we will go a little far afield. We have one coming up in a few weeks with Mike Caveney, because Mike has a book coming out about the sawing a woman in half illusion. And when people who are outside of magic talk about magicians, they mention two tricks: pulling a rabbit out of a hat, sawing a woman in half. So that was general enough interest to talk about that. It made sense to have him come in. We have people coming up like Liberty Larson, Jeff Altman, talking about growing up in magic, which is what Julie Eng talked about in our last episode, because Eli grew up in a magic store. His uncle Harry is sort of a cross between Jay Marshall and Eugene Berger. He had that sort of an upbringing. What is it like to grow up in magic? Here's people who have done it. So the idea of the podcast is at the end of each season, you will have heard an entire book. You'll also get background information from some pretty interesting people on a related topic.
I love it. I think it's a phenomenal concept, and it's just really exciting that you've already gotten in touch with just such incredible magicians. Jim, talk to me about it, like from your perspective. What's been a cool highlight of the podcast for you? Because, this may sound silly, but a podcast is like an audiobook, but people can reply to you. But really it is as somebody who listens to both, which I assume both of you do in at least some regard, even mildly, listen to both podcasts and audiobooks, they kind of have different feels to them. An audiobook is heavily edited. Every word is well sought after, usually just one person talking. A podcast is like you are within a conversation sometimes as a listener, and also obviously as an active, podcaster. Right now we're having a conversation. So Jim, what about you? Talk to me about how the podcast has been for you.
The real deal for me, the podcast is essentially an extension of Sunday Night Magic and the enjoyment I get out of Sunday Night Magic. Here are these world-class performers, and we get to spend an hour chatting with them about their life, about their work, about the people they have known or are fascinated by. And so to talk to Dick Cavett, to interview Dick Cavett for an hour, or to talk to David Regal for an hour. Jeff Altman had me on the floor for an hour with what he was doing. It's just been so much fun. And it's such a, when somebody asks me, I often will refer to myself, hey, I'm just a kid from St. Paul. And that's essentially my mindset always. I don't even know how I got here. I'm just a kid from St. Paul. And here I am talking to Dick Cavett. What the hell? How did that, so am I lucky? I'm incredibly lucky that 30 some odd years ago, I walked into an audition and met John, because all of these things have come from that. Not only did we work together for 30 years and he paid my bills, but now we're having this sort of fun adventure in magic because of our mutual love of the art form. And it just, it's been, I just am so delighted and tickled and honored. And the whole thing is, when I say it's all John, it's all John.
Well, if I can just once again interject, yes, it could have been all John. It could have just been me introducing the chapters, and you would have been there in spirit. But because I've listened to a lot of podcasts, including this one, in which on occasion Jonah will speak by himself, but 99% of the time, you're interacting with someone, you're having a thing back and forth. There are podcasts out there where it's just one person talking, and I don't really listen to that many because it's not that interesting. It just doesn't engage me. And so I realized early on, in order for it to work at all, I needed someone else. And it made sense to have it be you, not only because you're doing the audiobooks, but because in conversation while we're recording the podcast, you can say something like, well, the first trick I learned was Glorpy, and I have no idea what Glorpy is. And we can do 5 minutes on Glorpy that is kind of interesting to anyone inside or outside of magic. So having a co-host who has these sort of shared experiences, but also knows a lot more than I do, just makes it more interesting.
You guys have put out now about a dozen podcast episodes, 7 books and short stories, which have all become audiobooks. And is that right? 7? Did I get that right? Yeah.
Yep. 7 books. The most recent book is The Magic Square, and we are just inches away from being done recording that.
So exciting. And guys, this has been absolutely amazing. And one thing that I hope that people are, aside from just going to check out the books, and we'll do a wrap up in a second, but aside from that, I hope that people take from this a little bit of inspiration about working on things. Like, you all probably have a friend that you've worked with once, twice before in something that you can call to start a project, start a podcast, start a blog, start a YouTube channel, put on a show. Things are coming back. People are about to be dying to come to in-person events. Oh my goodness, right? So start putting on a ticketed event. There's so much, there's so many different things that you could do right now. Partner with, do something creative. And I think it's just really exciting to watch you two, after having what sounds like full and wonderful careers, still be incredibly full of excitement and energy for what I'm going to call random strange projects. Not to say that they're not, wonderful, but like we are in the corners of the internet here, and that's part of what gives us the joy of this whole thing. It's the long tail. It's that, 50 years ago, it's very hard to have people who like a little bit of mystery and like a little bit of magic discover, books written about those things. And it's amazing that you guys put it out. So hopefully people can take a little bit of that from this, because it's just inspiring to watch you two. It reminds me of when I started this podcast with Tyler, 5 years ago or whatever the case may be. And how do you guys feel about the body of work that you've put out in the world? Like, it feels like you put it a lot, but also in another sense, it feels like you've kind of just begun.
Yeah, we've got everything mapped out for this season. We're starting to look at season 2, which will be the bullet catch. So check back with us in 7 years and see how that went.
All right. And in terms of shows, are you planning on bringing those back?
We are. As soon as things open up a bit more, we are going to definitely try to bring back Sunday Night Magic in some form. We're just not quite sure what that is yet.
I'm tickled by your idea of magic or magic with. And in the latest book that we're doing, The Magic Square, we keep referencing Eugene Berger's phrase that in the house of magic, there are many rooms. And I'm intrigued and delighted by the fact that you are encouraging people, hey, you don't have to be a gigging magician to love magic or to collect magic or to, whatever. Just because you're not doing a French drop or making a silk come out your nose, you can still find a room in the house of magic to get into and enjoy. And I like that a lot, because so often, I kind of think of magic the way I think of baseball. I love baseball. I'm never going to play it, but I love watching it. And I love thinking about it. I love, but I've never been a baseball player except as a kid. That doesn't prevent me from really enjoying it. And I think the same, I like the fact that you are encouraging people, hey, get involved somehow on every level. And I think that's great, because I think it's a tremendous art form, especially when it's done well.
Yeah, one of the most exciting things about magic is, and sometimes this can be problematic, but sometimes it's just so wonderful, is that there's no official magic school. There's no award everyone needs to get. There's no rule. There's no first book everyone needs to have. And, I've interviewed a lot of people, and even though the stories kind of sound the same, they're all legitimately different. And people finding different key books, different key mentors, different people that help shape their journey. Some people like the puzzle and gamey aspect of it. Some people like the performing aspect of it. Some people like the creating aspect of it. Some people like live entertainment. Some people like Instagram. It's just, there's unlimited to it. And I know that's kind of true about everything now, but really with respect to magic, you don't need a degree. You don't need anything. You honestly can just put whatever you want out in the world and play and enjoy with magic. So I hope people enjoy that,
Yeah, I'd also say that I don't have any, scientific proof of this, but I don't think there's a lot of art forms where once you kind of get up to speed on it and can say some of the magic words you need to say to people to let them know you're in, you can talk to just about anybody in this industry. You can certainly email them. I've done that for the last 10 years when it comes to having questions that I needed answered. You can send David Williamson an email and you'll get a response. You can send Teller an email and you might get a response. You can get Max Maven on the phone. If you need to ask Jamie Insliss a question, there's a way to do it. These are the top people. And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure that a lot of other art forms have that sort of access to the best of the best.
100% agreed. We are so ridiculously, outrageously lucky to be able to do that. And that's another underlying message of what you two have been up to, is the lack of fear to go and connect with people, to put on cool projects, to connect with Suzanne, to go reach out to Eugene Berger, to put on his show, to reach out to these incredible performers and incredible magicians to be on the podcast and sharing about what's going on, and to dig deep, start these conversations. And I would reiterate what you're saying as somebody who now puts together conventions and puts together podcasts and puts together, guys, all your mentors are on Facebook. All your mentors have websites with contact forms on them that go directly to them. All of them, right? Like every single one of them. And they all answer them. So just, it's worth considering with magic that we're very, very, very lucky. And to not hesitate to go and send an email to say hello and go introduce yourself and go, articulate, this part is really good, this part I'm struggling with, this part. People will really want to, if you show that you are working on the material that somebody put out in the world, they will want to spend time working with you, helping you, sharing you. You build a lifelong friend because, and I'm sure you two know this, we're talking about putting things out in the world and what ends up coming back. And, I see the numbers. I see the number of people that listen to the podcast, and I see the number of people that email me or message me after an episode. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. Most people listen to a podcast and go on their merry day, as I do with most every podcast episode that I ever listen to of all time ever. So when you reach out, when you speak up, we think like, I'm going to be lost, drowned in this sea of inquiries and this endless thread of emails. They'll never answer me. And if you send something that's short, personal, and expecting a reply, that's a little secret. SPEAR, spear. Short, personal, and expecting a reply. You don't send them a long essay about your life. No. A short, personal email expecting a reply. I promise you, they will answer you. But thank you guys so much. This has been incredible. I want to ask some wrap-up questions because we do at the end of every episode. The first is a little bit about modern magic. Magic has changed a ton over the past year and over the past couple years, 10 years. What's one thing that you like about the world of modern magic and one thing that you don't like?
Well, I'll go first on what I like. I've really enjoyed Fool Us, for the first British version of it and the American version of it, and the way they're presenting magic and the way they're not chopping up magic. Jim and I both have friends who've been on it. We have friends who fooled them. Like I said, I fooled Teller in my own way. But the respect that is given to all the performers. I'm thinking back in particular to one, it might have been the British one, where there was a young kid doing something, and I don't think he fooled them. But the way that Penn Jillette spoke to that young man and said, you are me 50 years ago. You're going to go places. Imagine what that did for that kid. And how often have we seen, Jim and I were just talking about this the other day because we were dealing with some David Letterman clips with magicians, and his attitude toward magicians is not nearly that warm or inviting. So that's what I did. I just love watching Fool Us and seeing the love they have that they're able to put across in their show.
Jim, what's something that you like about the world of magic right now?
Eugene used to say that he thought one of the problems with magic was a sort of an undisciplined use of comedy to undercut the magical experience. So I watched Derek Delgadio's show and I'll tear up right now just talking about it. That experience was profound. I mean, it almost, you could base a religion on what the guy did. it was tremendous. And it hit you not just in your sort of puzzle mind, but in your heart. It just sort of like lands like a neutron bomb when that show is finishing. I don't think, I mean, so to me, that idea that magic starting to be something other than something that is done at kids' birthday parties or something you see in Vegas, but rather is a theatrical event that can rock your world, even if it's remote, like watching it on Hulu. I didn't see it live. I just saw the Hulu version. And as John and I have talked, I'm glad I didn't see it live, because I think I would have collapsed. I think I would have just been a complete, I don't think I could have survived it. I would have. So that is really exciting to me, that there is a way to make it adult entertainment, not in terms of blue or off color, but just in terms of power. Having it be something that can be uplifting and amazing and affect you emotionally. That's incredible to me, and something that magic should aspire to. Finding a way to make your work resonate in a way that isn't just a quick punchline is incredible.
I think he did something outstanding with that show and with the video version. And I'll just share, if you liked it, not that it's the same, it's different, but it's really amazing. Check out his audiobook or book, his new one, A Moral Man. The book is good, but the audiobook is really phenomenal because it's him reading it, and it's kind of like a couple of other touches on the stories and things that are in the show, and it's really wonderful. So
I will absolutely
do
that.
Yeah, you enjoy
absolutely.
it. What about on the flip side of that? So I'll pass it to John first. What's something that you don't like about the world of magic right now?
Well, there isn't much, but there is one thing that, now that I've seen more and more, and I've seen more magic than I should have in the last few years. No, I think so. Occasionally you'll run into performers who are just kind of running on autopilot, and it's evident, and it's hard to watch when they're doing things that, they have stock lines that clearly not only didn't work this time, but I don't think ever worked, or have, maybe worked once out of 100 times. And I always think of the Malcolm Gladwell thing about, if you do something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert. And I think, well, if you do it wrong for 10,000 hours, you're just going to be doing it wrong for 10,000 hours. And it just bothers me when performers have that opportunity to adapt what they're doing to the response they're getting from the audience, as opposed to just going up and doing their act. I've tried to reflect that in some characters in the books, because it's just kind of, it's not fun to watch.
Yeah, sometimes the lack of willingness to learn from the audience can really show. So thank you for that. Jim, what about for you? What's something you don't like in the world of magic right now?
If I had to say one thing that I don't like, it's not magic's fault. I would like there to be the opportunity to see good magic, good magicians more frequently at a local level. That's what Sunday Night Magic was all about, and it certainly scratched that itch for me. When you see somebody who really can bring it, it's a tremendous evening of entertainment. And so that, I guess that would be the only thing I could think of, is like, boy, I wish there'd be a way that, like in the old days when there was a vaudeville circuit that people could go on and you get to see these performers. So I wish something like that existed again, where magicians, not of the sort of level of a David Copperfield or a Chris Angel, but that those next level down, those people that we think, oh gosh, I'd love to see David Regal live, or oh boy, I wish I could see John Carney without going to the Magic Castle. I'm not going to get to LA that often. It'd be nice to have that in our own backyards a little more.
Love that. Yeah, especially you guys are, as much as you poo-poo at how far away and out of nowhere, Minneapolis is. You guys are still in a well enough place that people come into town. Think about people who live nowhere near, any in rural, or whatever. Like, they really don't have a chance to see anything. So I agree with you. Having lots of live theater is phenomenal. The next question is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a phenomenal addition to this show. So I'll ask you both, who would be a really wonderful guest to be featured on this show?
Well, I have the advantage over Jim that I know this podcast. So I know that's coming. I've thought about that one because we have talked to some great people in the last few months. And I'm going to jump out there and just say Jeff Altman. You may not know Jeff Altman,
I don't.
but you actually do. You just don't know that you do. He came to his father was Art Altman, who was a quote unquote amateur magician, but was very well respected in the field as an outstanding card man and hung out with Ed Marlowe. So Jeff Altman was raised knowing a lot about magic and cards. He went to the Magic Castle in the 70s with the idea of becoming a magician who does comedy. And he sort of got derailed and ended up being a stand-up comic for the majority of his career. He was also an actor and a spokesperson. So as soon as you see the face, you go, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, I've seen him and stuff. That's Jeff Altman. But now that he is semi-retired, he's returned to magic and is doing essentially corporate gigs. And we got a hold of Jeff and talked to him because, like I mentioned, Eli grew up in a magic store and grew up in a magic environment, and so did Jeff, and he had some great stories about it. But it was so much fun talking to someone who is that funny and that interesting, but who also really, really knows magic and has had an interesting experience of it where he came and hung out with Vernon and then just by chance stepped on stage at the Comedy Store, and all of a sudden magic was left behind and he was a comedian. So I would say Jeff Altman.
Wild. I love that. I love that story, and I think it's a wonderful recommendation. Jim, does somebody come to mind for you?
He's not really a magician, but I really enjoyed talking to Jay Johnson, who's a ventriloquist.
Cool.
He was a delight, and yes, we could put you in contact with him.
Cool.
He was a really great friend of Harry Anderson's, who I was an enormous fan of Harry Anderson, and so I thought he was insightful and funny and had a billion stories about magic and performing and being on stage. He'd be a guy that I think your audience would enjoy.
Love that. That's perfect. The next thing is plugs. Where can people find the books? Where can people find the audiobooks? Where can people find the podcast? And if people are in Minneapolis in the next couple of months, where can they find Sunday Night Magic maybe?
Well, I'll start at the end there. Sunday Night Magic, you can find us on Facebook, and we kind of keep people updated there as to our shows. There's nothing planned right now. I would not expect that we would be back until 2022, would be my guess. I don't know, though. It's hard to say. When it comes to all things Eli Marks, you just go to elimarksmysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS mysteries.com, and you can find the ebooks there. You can find the paperbacks there. You can find the audiobooks there. And there's a tab for the podcast as well. And that'll take you right to that place.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And Jim, I guess same thing for you. Where can people find you and find what you're up to aside from the book Sunday Night Magic? Where can they keep in contact with you as well?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Jim Cunningham. There's probably 1,000 Jim Cunninghams, but I'm the one that you want to find if you're looking for me, I guess. And then I just do about 3 shows that are open to the public, and the only one that's sort of magic related is a version of Eugene's hauntings called The Phantom's Feast that I am in and host every year here in Minnesota. And then I do a show at Christmas time at the St. Paul Hotel that I produce, which is a version of It's a Wonderful Life done as a live radio show circa 1946. Yeah.
Amazing. And where can people find out about those?
Well, you could go to. I'm sure that the Phantom's Feast has a page on Facebook, or you could Google that Phantom's Feast Minneapolis or Minnesota and find information on those tickets. And we do a a dinner, and then I tell some real ghost stories about the location that we're in, and we have some ghost experiments. And then I always invite an actual paranormal investigator to join us at the end of the evening, and we take a little walk around the grounds of this place that we're in.
Love that.
On a little ghost hunt, and that's fun.
I love
and
that.
And then Wonderful Life is at the St. Paul Hotel in St. Paul. stpaulhotel.com, I would guess. And that will be in our 15th year doing that show.
Wow.
It's a lot of fun.
Wow, that sounds phenomenal, and congrats. Those sound really, really wicked. The last thing is the take-home point. So we've been talking for a long time now about a bunch of different things: magic, books, producing shows, audiobooks, talking to magicians, loads of different things. People are going to think back to this episode, and maybe they won't remember all of it, but they'll remember one core idea. They'll remember something important. What would you love that one thing to be? I'll start with you, John. John, what would you love that one thing to be?
I think it's the thing Jim talked about just saying yes and not necessarily worrying about things being moneymakers, but just being open to trying new projects and connecting with people to see what you can create.
Love that. Jim, what about you? What's the take-home point that you'd love everyone to remember when they think back to this?
Yeah, I guess I would say it's a point that you made that, magic this is such a cool art form. And you don't have to perform it to love it, to enjoy it, to seek it out, to find a way to incorporate it into your life, whether it's, whatever. I love magic. I love it. And more people, I think, could find a way to have magic be a part of their life, magic and magic with, and not have to worry about learning a double lift or performing it. I don't ever want to perform magic, ever. It's too nerve-wracking, but I love it. I love watching it.
But you know what? What you just said there is great, because there's so many of these like imaginary rules people put, like, I have to learn a pass, I have to learn a double lift, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to, you really don't. So I love what you said. There's so much going on in the world of magic. There's many doors, many rooms, as Eugene Berger said, in the world of magic. So thank you two so much, John and Jim. This has been absolutely incredible. I hope everybody goes and checks out the Eli Marks series. They are fun, and it's really, really cool. Both that you get to indulge in something that is not a book teaching you how to do card tricks again, but as well, it still has a couple of fun nods to the world of magic and some fun stories for you to have inside of your brain. And by the way, if you were thinking to yourself, Jim has a wonderful deep voice, he should read audiobooks. He does, and they sound really wonderful. So
God bless you.
Thank you too.
Thanks so much.
This has been amazing, and hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks, Jonah.
Thank you. A delight. Thanks for having us.
Well, there you go. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. As mentioned on the podcast, you can go check out the Eli Marks series and get one of the books, or you can get it for free by checking out the Eli Marks podcast, which also has some pretty cool interviews. I hope you liked the episode. I hope, of course, that you learned something. If you want more Discourse and Magic fun, go to discourseandmagic.com. There's a lot of fun, cool stuff there for you, and a way to sign up to get emails when cool things happen, so you don't have to go digging around the internet to find them. I think you'd like that. Anyways, see you later. See you next Thursday. Thanks for being here. Peace.